Claire pulled her keys from her mitten and pushed at the porch light as she came up the walk. She heard the laugh before she saw faces. Mark stood by the driver's door with his hand on the hood, head tipped back in that easy way he did when he remembered a joke. A man Claire hadn't met yet leaned close and answered with the same whole laugh. Suspicion tightened her chest, a quick, physical protest that made her fingers go numb around the cold iron of the railing. She stepped forward with the gate scraping under her boot and planned to interrupt, to announce herself, to reclaim a familiar moment. Claire had married Mark because he had been steady when everything else felt uncertain. She had said yes in a church with sunlight slanting through the east windows. She had promised a life built from small, reliable things. Tonight, watching Mark and the new neighbor trade a joke by the car, the promise felt porous. The neighbor's manner was attentive in a way Claire did not recognize. He leaned in when Mark spoke, watched Mark's face as if learning its edges. Claire folded her hands at her waist. Her breath came out in a shallow line. She wanted to ask what was funny. She wanted to ask who the man was. She wanted, underneath everything else, to know where she stood. Mark. She used his name and let it sit like a small weight. The sound of it stopped both men. Mark turned, his smile tightening into something careful. "Claire," he said, and glanced toward the man by the car. "This is Ethan." "Ethan, this is Claire, my wife." He moved his body in a way that made room between them, a polite, practical motion. Ethan stepped back, a hand on the car for balance. He lifted his chin once and offered a short, clear, "Nice to meet you, Claire." He did not reach for her hand. His voice had a calm baritone. Claire watched him, how his hair fell across his forehead, how his coat sat on broad shoulders, how his smile made a small dimple at one cheek. Her chest tightened again. Curiosity nudged at that suspicion, sliding under it like sun through a crack in winter clouds. "We were just—" Mark started, then stopped. He smoothed his coat with both hands and looked at her the way he did when he tried to make a practical problem sound simple. "We were hauling boxes." Ethan moved into the old Hale place next door. He needed a hand with a couch. "I told him I'd help." Claire kept her voice steady. "You could have told me there." A small accusation. She could feel how her throat worked around the words. Mark's gaze dropped to the snow at their feet. "I know." "I am sorry." "I thought we'd be quick." Ethan's eyes shifted between them. He tilted his head in a mannerism Claire would learn later. The way he listened before answering. "I didn't mean to crowd anything," he said. "I'll go finish stacking boxes." He turned, but his boots left an extra shoe mark in the snow that made Claire's teeth ache. Inside, Claire found a plate with one edge nicked and a kettle still warm from earlier. The house smelled of cedar and old wool. She set down her bag and walked back to the kitchen window, watching the driveway through glass faint with frost. Mark's steps were light on the stoop when he came inside. He carried a small box of picture frames. He leaned against the counter and said, almost conversational, "He's got a workshop." Good with his hands, Claire's suspicion shifted into curiosity. She folded her hands and tucked a stray wave of hair behind her ear. "Does he know about us? About how things are?" The question came out sharper than she intended. Mark looked at her with a look that could have been pleading. "Claire, we've been distant lately. I thought having a neighbor around might. I don't know. Maybe it would be good for both of us." She heard the apology under "I thought." She heard its shape, the way it tried to fix. Her shoulders tightened. "Mark, you asked someone new into our space without asking me." She placed the frames on the counter with a small, deliberate thump. Mark put the box down and reached for her hand. Claire did not take it at once. Her fingers clenched, then relaxed. "Claire," he said, using her name like a bridge, "I didn't mean to make you feel left out. I wanted to help, I didn't to think." Ethan knocked on the kitchen door and called, "Mark, are you okay with me leaving the ladder here? It's too heavy to take up the stairs alone." His voice came through the closed door, measured and steady. Claire heard restraint under it. She walked to the door and opened it a crack. Ethan stood framed by the porch light. His breath fogged in front of him. He held a small paper bag wrapped in brown twine. "I left something on your gate this morning," he said, "a spare bulb and some coffee beans. I thought you might like both." Claire accepted the bag without thinking. The twine caught on her mitten. Inside was a small jar of a local roast and a single home-baked biscuit wrapped in wax paper. There was also a short note folded in the bag. Her fingers hesitated over it. Curiosity pulled her toward the paper. She read 3 simple lines. "Welcome to the neighborhood, Ethan." The note should have been neutral. It wasn't. Claire felt an unfamiliar flutter. The kitchen felt too loud. Mark watched her face the way he did when he tried to read a map he did not want to admit was wrong. "You shouldn't have." "Ethan," he said. And there was a tone there Claire recognized. Protective, a little sharp. Ethan stepped back, hands in his pockets. "I just wanted to say hello." No more than that. His eyes met Claire's with an attention that did not look away. Claire folded the waxed paper and put it into her apron pocket as if to keep it secure and unreadable. Outside later that afternoon, a car wheezed and then stopped in the driveway. Ethan waved for help. He popped the hood and frowned at a tangle of wires. He muttered a soft word and looked over at Claire at the back door. There was a practicalness to his movement. No show, only effort. Claire grabbed a rag and stepped into the cold. She knelt by the engine and handed him a wrench. "Thanks, Ethan," and for a moment there was only the sound of 2 people working together, metal, gloves rubbing, breath. Claire felt a small, electric ease in the exchange. "Do you like coffee strong or light?" The question was ordinary, but it landed differently now that she had a name for the hands taking the wrench. Ethan smiled, a quick dimple showing, "Strong. Like the cold outside," he said. Mark watched them from the kitchen window. He pressed his palm flat against the glass, leaving a faint print. Later he would tell Claire he had only wanted a neighbor to make small talk with, someone to shovel the sidewalk. But the print on the window in that moment looked to Claire like a barrier he could not name. She stood and let the cold lick at the hem of her coat, feeling both seen and unseen. That evening, Mark confronted her in the kitchen with a map of ordinary complaints, disguised as reason. "Claire, I feel like we miss each other in the day." He took deliberate breaths. "I thought an extra person around might break that pattern." "I didn't think you'd feel excluded." They moved in the narrow loop of familiar argument, fingers on the table, eyes avoiding the center of the room. "Mark, we don't miss each other because the house is empty. We miss each other because we stopped asking each other small things." Claire's voice was steady, not theatrical. She folded her hands and looked at the chipped rim of the plate on the counter. "You can fix the space between us by importing someone new." She set the biscuit on the table and moved her fingers around it, as if considering whether the gesture was petty or necessary. Mark's jaw worked. "Claire, I'm not trying to replace anything. I promised you a life of steady hands." "I am trying to keep that promise." He reached for her, then stopped. His hand hovered above hers, the motion an apology and an offer. Claire felt a shift in her feelings then, suspicion warming into something like guilt. She had been looking for signs of betrayal, and here was one of care, clumsy and ill-timed. Later that night, alone on the porch with wool on her hands, Claire found Ethan sitting on the bottom step, shoulders hunched against the cold, a thermos between his knees. He looked up when she came near. "You need help with anything else?" she asked. The line was practical, a question about transport, about snow. He pushed the thermos forward and offered the lid for her to drink. "I moved here because my sister found a job in town." Ethan, after a long pause, "I needed a quieter place. I thought I could fix the old place up and help my sister settle. That's it. No reasons beyond that." Claire listened. She watched the muscle in his throat when he talked. She had felt a pull toward him, and then a guilt like a physical rod pressing into her sternum. The guilt was an emotion that made her swallow, made her fold her hands. Curiosity slid toward a careful watchfulness. She found herself asking what Mark had told Ethan about their marriage. Ethan shook his head, only that you and Mark seemed close. You baked somewhere in the past and kept the neighborhood bread warm. That's it. An hour later Mark came out with a thermos of his own. He sat a small distance away, not close enough to touch Claire, he said, voice low. I didn't mean to make you feel watched. I only wanted someone else to talk to about the neighborhood. I thought it might loosen us up, help me. Claire looked between them. Both men had open palms and hesitant smiles. She folded her hands into her lap. The night was quiet except for the hiss of the heater from inside the house and the distant scrape of shovel against asphalt. Her suspicion had shifted yet again, now to something like decision-making. She could either name the hurt and force a change, or press it down and let it grow cold and brittle. The next morning, Claire found a small photograph in the brown paper bag that had held the biscuit. It had been tucked under the waxed paper. A candid picture of Mark laughing at a 17th birthday party, hair longer, face softer, an arm around a woman Claire did not recognize. The back read in block letters, "For you if you ever wanted to remember." Claire held the photo and turned it over. She knew then that Mark had been carrying traces of other lives in pockets he never told her about. The realization shifted her suspicion into a sharper H. Was she living with a man who kept other histories private? When she brought the photo to Mark that evening, his face folded in a way Claire had not seen. "I found this in the bag," she said. "Why would you leave this? Who is she?" She spoke in short sentences now. She wanted answers that could be given plainly. Mark's hands moved, fingers searching the table as if for a thread. "That was before you and I were before the wedding," he said. He paused, then added, "She was a friend who moved away. It meant nothing then. It means nothing now." His voice had a steady edge to it. Claire watched him measure the words. He did not plead. He did not deny the photograph existence. He set his jaw and said, "I kept it for a reason I can't explain. I thought someday it might remind me of who I was. I'm sorry I didn't tell you." The apology did not land as a sweeping confession. It sat on the table like a small, concrete object. Claire's hands sought the wedding band at her finger and found the metal cool under her skin. She rolled it 2 times, then set it on the table in front of her. The gesture was not a demand for separation. It was a request for time. "I need to think," she said. The words were short and stark. Mark reached, then froze. Ethan, who had returned to drop off a ladder, heard and turned. The 2 men looked at one another with a new calculation. Ethan's face was open. Mark's was closed in on itself. In that split second, Claire felt the story tilt. She realized that both men had power over her future, and that neither had acted in ways that made the choice simple. A small confrontation followed, 3 quick exchanges where voices rose and fell. "Mark, you hid things." Claire, "Mark, you brought someone into our house without telling me." Mark answered, "Claire, I tried to fix it." Ethan, "Claire, I did know." The lines came fast, short. Each name anchored the sentence for the listener. The rapid back and forth lasted only moments, but left a ring of silence behind it like the echo after a bell. Claire stepped back and out into the snowy street at dusk. The lamps threw pools of golden light over 2 parked cars. Her boots scuffed in the snow between them. On one side, Mark stood under an amber street lamp, hands in his coat, shoulders squared. On the other, Ethan leaned against his car, hands folded, face thoughtful. The air bit at Claire's cheeks. Decision clustered in her mouth like a sore sweet. She could hear each breath as if it were a small drumbeat. She looked at Mark. "What do you want, Mark?" she asked. Her voice was low but clear. "I want us to find each other again. I don't know how, Claire, but I want that." His fingers tightened at his sides. She looked then at Ethan. "And you?" she asked. Ethan's voice was steady. "I don't want to come between you two. I want to be neighborly." If you'd rather I kept my distance, I will." He pushed off the car and took 3 slow steps forward. "But Claire," he added, "I want to pretend I haven't noticed you. I want to pretend I want to look up when you laugh. I want to make promises I don't intend to keep." Claire felt a pressure behind her ribs. Her hands went to her coat pocket and touched the folded note Ethan had left. She thought of the photograph, of Mark's steady apologies, of the way Ethan had held a wrench and made small talk about coffee. She folded her hands and breathed out. The decision did not arrive as a bright, clean strike. It arrived as a pause she could feel in her muscles. She walked back inside and set her wedding band on the kitchen counter. The metal was heavy in her palm. Mark watched its placement as if it were a map laid out between them. "I need time," she said. The 3 words were not a threat. They were a boundary placed politely, firmly, as one might set a cup down to keep the table steady. The 2 men exchanged a look, Mark's raw, quick. Ethan's steady and unreadable. Claire moved to the window and breathed against the glass. Frost webbed at the edges. The porch light shimmered on the melting snow. She had not made a final choice. She had chosen a pause, a concrete action. The band on the counter, the request for space. That was her line drawn for the night. Mark closed his eyes and then opened them as if preparing a reply. Ethan stepped back toward his own door with a careful distance. Outside, a neighbor's radio hummed faintly down the street. The house settled around the 3 of them. Their decisions, their hesitations, the way small objects could hold the weight of a relationship for one breath at a time. Claire stood where she could see both porches and both cars. Her hands folded in front of her. The chapter ended on one clear, physical beat. She placed the wedding band on the counter and asked for time, and the 2 men were left to make sense of that pause. Emotion root. Suspicion. Emotion shifts. Suspicion, curiosity, guilt, resolve. The shifts appear in how Claire's hands move, in the tightening of her breath, in the way she sets the ring down and asks for time. Mark spoke over the chatter and the hall went quiet. "Claire, not like that," he said, and the platter she carried tilted in her hands. The shame pushed Claire through the double doors before the plates hit the table. She left the room with the noise folding behind her, footsteps muffled on packed snow, and the first emotion that moved her was shame. The sharp heat in her face that made her fingers clench the mitten. That shame set the day's path. She stepped into the courtyard to breathe and to get away from the eyes that had landed on her. Claire moved across the stone courtyard with her scarf up, the fundraiser lanterns spilling warm light onto wet footprints. She had come to the church hall to arrange pies and name tags, not to be corrected by Mark in front of neighbors. She thought of the way Mark had laughed at the hedge outside last month, the small, private jokes that used to belong only to them, and felt how distant that sound had become. The in-progress conflict was visible. People had watched him redirect her hands. Some had smiled politely, and some had glanced away. The practical problem was clear in the first minutes. The evening had shifted her standing in the room and exposed a tension she had been managing at home. Ethan left the hall a beat after her. He closed the door on the warm light and walked over without speaking at first. He carried a tray with 2 paper cups and a small stack of napkins. When he reached Claire, he offered a cup without comment. She looked at his hands, then at the steam lifting from the cup, and let him hold the thermos for a second while she caught her breath. Ethan's quiet attention made her shoulders loosen in a way that surprised her, embarrassment receding into an odd, cautious relief. "Are you all right, Claire?" Ethan, his voice low against the night, he tilted his head, listening. The question was practical, not pitying. His eyes tracked the rim of the cup, then met hers. "I am fine, Claire," and then corrected herself. "No, I need a minute." She folded her hands around the cup and felt the paper dampen under her fingers. The shame that had pushed her outside softened when he said her name without the neighborly lightness that had made the interruption worse. The emotion shifted. Shame softened into vulnerability, and the vulnerability nudged her toward honesty. Declare him in short sentences what happened. She did not turn the story into a confession. Heat in front of people, she said. He corrected me on the setup. She used the name Mark multiple times as she spoke, keeping the account concrete. Ethan's face tightened for a moment when she said Mark. He did not ask for details beyond what she offered. He kept listening. You handled it steadier than I would have. Ethan, you didn't drop anything. He smiled a little, and the dimple at his cheek appeared. The compliment was small and precise. It landed not as praise but as recognition that Claire had felt exposed. She noticed the way he leaned in when she paused, the way his boots scuffed the packing snow. That small attention changed the shape of her evening. The feeling inside her shifted from simply embarrassed to quietly seen. They stood in the courtyard with the fundraiser sound muffled through the building. A lantern light picked out Claire's knit sleeve and the silver locket at her throat. Her mind moved from the immediate sting to a memory from 2 nights earlier, the porch light when she came home and Mark standing by the car, laughing with someone she hadn't met before. She remembered pulling her keys from the mitten and thinking, at that moment, that she had come in on the edge of a conversation she did not belong to. She Mark's name aloud, and Ethan recalled that laugh with a small, neutral question. The recollection was concrete. It was the exact tilt of his head, the way his hand raked the hood of the car. She did not narrate the feeling. She described the scene to Ethan. She felt torn in the next beat. Loyalty to a man who was steady, and an unnameable relief when someone else noticed her without a history to protect. She moved between those 2 responses without declaring either. Her actions made the emotion visible. She tucked hair behind her ear and went quiet. And then she looked away when she thought of how many years Mark and she had been the kind of couple people relied on. The tension rose because the choice was not dramatic yet, but it was real. Her movements and silences began to carry weight. They went back inside because the fundraiser needed hands. Mark found them at the entrance and wore his steady face. He made a small joke to cover the annoyance he carried, and it landed with the wrong cadence. "Everything okay out here?" he asked, then laughed as if the laugh would smooth the trace of irritation. He reached for Claire's elbow and steered her back past the food tables. His hand was familiar in its steadiness. Ethan stepped backward, setting the tray down on a side table, and his posture narrowed for an instant as he let the 2 of them take the room again. Mark's control returned the scene to a public balance that Claire had a hard time owning. Inside, the charity volunteers resumed their work. Claire moved paper cups and taped labels, and Mark moved in a practiced orbit, checking a clipboard, asking the minister about a sound check, adjusting the heater. His motions were efficient, and the gestures carried an old intimacy that now felt functional. Claire tried to keep the rhythm of the evening, but each time Mark spoke in that measured tone, she felt small and edged toward an internal question she did not voice. The emotion shifted again. The soft relief she had felt with Ethan cooled into a low unease, a doubt about how much warmth still lived between her and Mark. By the time the fundraiser ended, the room had thinned and the volunteers had stacks of unopened flyers. Mark walked home with her under the street lamps, his coat buttoned, his scarf tidy. He reached for her hand as if to make sure she matched his pace. Claire let him hold her hand but kept her fingers curved, a careful, minimal contact. At the house, they moved through the kitchen together, and the unpaid details of daily life slipped into place. The leftover coffee in a thermos, a dish in the sink, the dog collar by the door. The ordinary is what often reveals what is missing. Tonight it felt like a stage where nothing spontaneous could happen. They began to argue with small sentences that grew sharper, because the subject was not the fundraiser alone. Mark spoke first. "You're on edge lately," he said. "You left in the middle of the setup." He held his voice steady. "You corrected me in front of everyone." Claire answered, You made a joke to cover it up. She used his name several times as she pushed the point. The shame she had felt outside hardened into irritation. I was helping, Mark. You were fumbling the name tags, and you dropped a stack. He narrowed his eyes when he said that. Claire, you were distracted. His words hit like practical things, list items labeled on a small ledger. And Claire heard the history in them, that he always sorted the problems into boxes. You could have called me aside, she said. You could have said, Claire, let's do this after. Her voice stayed short and even. You didn't have to do it the way you did. She remembered the faces in the hall, and how the smile of the woman at the refreshments had been slow and measured when Mark had corrected her. I didn't think it mattered, Mark. I don't want you to make mistakes in front of people. He paused. I don't like when things go sideways in public. He used the word we and then I, mixing the two as if the line between them was obvious. The conversation moved fast and clipped. It had the rhythms of a negotiation one makes about shared routines. Claire pushed back. It's not about mistakes, she said. It's about being treated like a child. She set the thermos on the counter with a sharper movement than necessary and clicked. The sound filled the small kitchen for a second. They exchanged 3 quick lines after that, the rapid back and forth the notes asked for. You don't have to be right all the time, Claire. I did to say you were being right. I'm asking to be trusted. I trust you, Mark replied. I just want you to be careful. Careful doesn't feel like listening, Claire answered. It feels like being boxed. The sequence of short lines increased the tension. Mark's steady tone shifted into a defensive edge. You keep picking at things, Claire. You bring up old faults. He reached for a dish towel and straightened it on the counter, as if that small motion would restore order. Claire watched his hands, the way he straightened his jacket earlier, the repetition of small control rituals. She left the kitchen before the argument could escalate. She needed air. Outside, the night had frozen into fine crusts on the bushes, and the street lamps threw narrow cones of light across the walkway. The air found her throat and made it tight. She breathed steadily and then heard a shovel scraping. On the sidewalk across the way, an elderly neighbor's path had a neat row of cleared snow. Ethan was there, pushing the shovel, the shaft rubbing against his gloved palm. He saw her and gave a small wave. He set the shovel into the snowbank and crossed over. I was meeting Mrs. Keene for coffee, he said. She likes the sun on her porch in the morning. Figured I'd clear this. He handed her a steaming paper cup, as if he had been carrying it for that moment. The simple, specific action of shoveling and offering a cup gave Claire a new shape of relief. Her emotions shifted again from edged unease to appreciation. The physicality of the scene, the scrape of the shovel, the perfume of wet wool and a paper cup in her hands, grounded her. You always seemed to be around at the right time, Claire. She watched his hands as they warmed around the cup, right or wrong time. Ethan. I like helping. He did not say anything about Mark or the fundraiser. He kept the conversation on small, concrete things. The temperature, the neighbor's cat on the fence, the exact number of steps to Mrs. Keenest's door. Claire liked the plainness. It made her feel steady. That morning later, the fault line moved again. Mark noticed Claire's phone on the kitchen table while she sliced bread. The screen was unlocked and a message from Ethan sat open. A short, warm line thanking her for the help and mentioning the thermos. Mark read it without asking. He read the pattern of words and read his own history into it. He closed the phone and set it down, and the face he wore then was different from the one she saw in the hall earlier. The first clear emotion rising in him was suspicion. The word entered the scene quietly, and then became loud in his posture. His jaw set, his shoulders pulled tight. When he confronted her in the driveway that night, the exchange came fast. Mark's words were blunt. Who is Ethan to you? He asked. He used her name with a tilt that felt like accusation. He's the neighbor. Claire. He helped Mrs. Keen and he helped at the fundraiser. She held the phone in her hand and tried to keep the explanation practical. She repeated facts: rides, shoveling, thermos. The repeated naming kept the conversation concrete and traceable. You talked to him too much. Mark, you went outside with him at the fundraiser. There was heat in his voice. Claire, I saw the messages. He stepped closer to her and the space between them contracted. Ethan arrived then, out of breath from walking from his porch. He saw the angle of Mark's posture and the taut set of Claire's hands. He stepped forward without hesitation. Mark, she was outside because she needed air. Ethan, I offered a cup. That's it. His voice was calm but firm. He used both names in the sentence to anchor who was who. The confrontation escalated. Don T, tell me what happened. Mark snapped. This is between Claire and me. He reached out and took the phone from the table and tapped the message thread. This sounds like flirting. He read a phrase aloud that Ethan had written. You made the evening less awkward. Mark's face hardened at that exact line. He interpreted the warmth as a crossing of a line. Ethan answered with a quick, measured defense. Mark, that's a thank you. That isn't anything more. He put his hands up in a small gesture that tried to keep the peace. Claire, you know me. Look at me. I haven't taken anything. He spoke in short sentences, each one naming the other person to keep clarity in the heat. The argument became a rapid exchange with short lines. Claire, who is he? Mark, stop. Claire, Ethan, say something. Mark demanded. Claire, I am not accusing you, Mark added. Ethan stepped in. Mark, I respect your marriage. I respect you. The volley hit the range required. 3 to 6 quick turns that mapped who held which stance. Voices rose in the driveway, and a neighbor peered from a window across the street. The cold air made each word crisp. Mark's suspicion drove him toward a decision. He asked Claire to explain emotions she had not named. He wanted immediate clarity, and Claire refused that demand. Instead, she spoke in actions. She set the phone on the hood of the car, took off her mitten, and looked at both men in turn. I need space. The line was short and exact. It was not an escape. It was a decision meant to buy clarity. Mark heard the word as a retreat and flinched. Ethan stepped back a step and folded his arms at his chest. The confrontation reached its peak. Mark shouting in the driveway, Ethan defending a simple kindness, Claire refusing to be the arena. The scene hit the chapter's climax. After Mark left, driving off with a staccato of engine noise, Claire stood where his taillights had been and felt the cold cut through her coat. She held her scarf tight and breathed with slow, visible exhalations. Ethan came up the walk to her porch and did not cross the threshold without invitation. He stayed under the light as if waiting for permission. He watched her without pressing. The emotion that drove Claire then was not dramatic, it was a narrowed choice. She could return to the practical steadiness she had built with Mark, or she could push to understand why a neighbor's attention had unsettled her so thoroughly. I need some days to think. She named the duration as if it were a concrete plan. I want space to figure this out without being shouted at in the driveway. She set her jaw and the muscles in her hand relaxed from their clenched state. Ethan replied with a short sentence, take what you need, Claire. I'll be here, he it slowly, and when he used her name it sounded like a promise to hold a place, not like an invitation. He did not offer to fix anything. He did not make a demand. His manner communicated a different kind of steadiness than Mark's, available, not directive. She watched him go back to his porch, but turned her back only after he had taken the shovel from the snowbank and set it against the railing. The image she kept was concrete. The dark leather of his satchel, the way his watch caught the street lamp light for one small, ordinary flash. That image, not a feeling word, sat with her as she unlocked the front door and stepped inside. Inside the house, the kitchen light was small and warm. Claire placed the phone on the counter and opened the drawer where they kept extra keys. She did not call Mark. She did not answer the texts that arrived immediately after the argument. Instead, she made tea exactly the way she knew it would taste, consistent, and placed the cup on the counter. The final scene of the chapter was a specific movement. Claire wrapped both hands around the mug, set the locket against her palm, breathed in the scent of linen and cedar she liked, and then walked to the front steps and opened the door again. She stood on the top step and watched the street. The snow was soft at the edges of the lamplight. Mark's taillights were gone. Ethan's porch light glowed across the way. Claire closed the door behind her with a decisive click and leaned on the banister. She allowed more to the air than to anyone. "I need time to know what I want." Then she opened the door a crack and left it that way while she went inside to sit with the silence and the practical next steps she had already chosen. The chapter ends with Claire asking for space on the snowy steps, the cold pressing into the house behind her, and the porch light across the street where Ethan had stood. The conflict of the evening is resolved into a concrete decision. She will take days to think and demands no immediate reconciliation. The emotional aftertaste is uneasy but specific, a choice made in action, not an abstract promise, and that action propels the story forward. Mark pushed the photograph down hard enough that the edge caught the ceramic salt shaker and sent it rattling. "Who is he?" he said, looking at Claire like someone who had found a crack in his map. Suspicion landed in Claire like cold air, sharp, physical, immediate, and she could not move past it without answering. She reached for the photo before Mark could, fingers brushing the gloss, and saw herself laughing, hair loose, head tipped toward Ethan. The kitchen light threw hard lines across the table. The confrontation began in motion, not memory. Claire's voice came out small. "Mark, it's just..." She stopped when his face narrowed. "Just what, Mark?" He pushed his chair back and stood. His jacket made the same clean line it always did. His hands kept steady when he wanted control. "You were at a fundraiser, Claire," he said. "You were laughing with him. You didn't tell me the accusation was not loud. It was compact, precise, meant to hurt and to measure how much." The first shift moved the room, suspicion to raw, exposed shame. She set the photograph down and felt the plastic edge press into her palm. "Mark, I told you about the new neighbor." "Claire, I didn't." "There's nothing." Her sentence faltered under the photo's shape. She thought of the night she had walked up the porch steps. Mark at the truck with that easy tilt to his head. A man she hadn't met answering his joke. She thought of plates tilting in chapter 2, the way noise folded behind her. Now Mark had the picture in his hand and proof that something outside their tidy calendar had happened. "You me about a neighbor, Mark. You didn't tell me you were spending nights." He stopped. He did not finish the word. He had never been the type to invent drama. He preferred schedules, paid bills, clear calendars. "Claire," he said, naming her like he named the dog or a key. "I can be the only one who thinks this looks wrong." The line landed like a test. Claire swallowed. Her throat made a small dry sound. "Mark, I was at the pottery fundraiser. Ethan about the clay sauce. We laughed about a glaze recipe. That's it, she used specifics because specifics were proof. She described the blue apron she had borrowed at the event, the way her hair had come loose when she reached for a mop of wet clay. Mark's jaw tightened. He did not let it slide. "Why are there texts at midnight?" Mark and the kitchen air pinched. He shoved his phone across the table toward her. Claire looked at the screen. A thread of short messages. Ethan asking about a jar she wanted to borrow. Claire answering about the jar. Not flirtation, but the time on a message lit at the top of the screen read 12:50, 8 a.m., which Mark read like a verdict. The second emotional shift moved Claire from shame into a rising, hot defensiveness. "Mark, that's not..." "Claire, I was awake late. I was rearranging the guest list. I didn't mean to hide it." She the last part as a fact. She felt the truth in it, and the weakness of that truth. "You left early from rehearsal yesterday," she added, because she needed to anchor her claim to something both of them remembered. "You left while I stayed to finish the set." I told you about my plans for the afternoon. Her sentences were short, small, precise. They were arranged like evidence. Mark rubbed his temple. That's not the point, Claire. The point is I feel like I am not in the room with you. You laugh with him differently. You watch him differently. Her name again, not to be gentle now, but to cut the space between them. Claire, not like that, he said. And the words landed with the same weight he had used in the living room weeks before when a platter tipped and she walked away. The memory of that earlier rebuke came back raw in the way his voice could steady into instruction. Claire folded her hands, the small motions she made when she wanted to appear calm. She could feel the outline of the life they'd agreed to, the mortgage, the shared grocery list, the cross-stitched calendar. She could feel Mark's steady presence as a kind of scaffolding. She could also feel, at the base of her throat, a different movement, a search for shape and sound that she had not named for years. That movement had started in small ways. A smile at a neighbor's joke, a longer look when someone mentioned a pottery kiln. But those were not words she could use to stop Mark's phone from making proof. A knock at the door cut across the argument before Claire could answer. She looked up and saw Ethan in the entryway, coat dusted with snow, hands open as if to show he carried nothing but his satchel. He stood calm and quiet on the threshold, like someone who had practiced appearing at precisely the right time. Ethan, Claire. Her voice had a new edge, surprised, raw. Mark rose and moved toward the door in a measured way. My name is Claire. Ethan, when Mark spoke first. He did not drop his eyes. He did not flinch. Mark's name clearly, as if to remind him they were neighbors now, not strangers. Claire felt the room shift. The third emotion shift ran under the surface. From defensiveness into wary curiosity, you came to the door, mark it as both observation and challenge. He folded his hands like he did before speaking at meetings. Why are you here, Ethan? The question made the porch feel smaller. Snow scraped against the tread at his boots. Ethan kept his satchel strap steady. I heard voices. I thought someone might need help. Claire, I meant no trouble. He spoke slowly, measured. There was nothing theatrical in his tone. He described the reason simply. He had been at the community workshop, had seen Claire's name in the donor list, and had wanted to return a book she'd dropped at a table. The specific, the title of the book, the time it had been left, the volunteer who had handed it to him. His exactness did two things, made the accusation less comfortable, and made Claire realize that his presence was not a casual stunt. Mark's eyes narrowed. You two laughing at the fundraiser looked different than friends. You were close in the photo. He set the photograph on the entry table with both palms. He did not leave room for sentiment. Claire, tell me this isn't what it looks like. The words required a short exchange, and that exchange came fast. Claire, who is he? Mark demanded. Mark, Claire began. Don't Claire, Mark snapped. Don't close your mouth and expect me to guess. He stepped forward. Claire, not like that. The phrase repeated from his memory in chapter 2 circled here now Mark's steady chord of disapproval. The room tightened. Ethan did not back down. Mark, I'm not trying to take Claire from you, he said. I help with the pottery collective. I liked her comment on a thread about glazes. That's what that picture is. That's not a secret. His voice was calm and plain, which made him sound more dangerous in the context of an argument. Dangerous because calm people can be ruthlessly honest. Claire interjected. Mark, please. Ethan, me about a kiln that opens early. I went. I laughed. There was a photo, that is the whole thing, Claire, then the past tense, then the truth. She added, I didn't hide it because I thought it mattered. I didn't know you would see it like this. Her breath sounded small in the kitchen light. Mark's mouth moved. Then why didn't you tell me you were staying late? Why didn't you come home? The sequence of questions became the second argument. Short lines, a rapid exchange that edged from accusation to pleading. Mark, I needed time to finish the plates. Claire, you know I get lost in work. I told you I might be late. see it like evidence, like the earlier fact of him leaving rehearsal. "Claire, you chose this without me knowing, Mark. You left me out of the schedule." His voice lost softness. "I keep our plans," he added. "I keep our calendar because I know what works." The words were clear. Mark's steadiness was also the source of his pain. Ethan shifted from foot to foot and then stepped forward with a single line. "Mark, I am not here to argue. I am here because Claire's hands looked cold when she left the studio last week and I offered my scarf. That's why there's a photo." "I didn't mean anything by it." His short explanation was precise. Scarf, studio, last week. And it made Claire hear the details differently. Mark's face tightened. "A scarf. A photo." He the words slowly, as if they were pebbles he wanted to examine. "Claire, why didn't you tell me?" he asked again. Claire felt her mouth dry. She thought of the memory in the hallway closet, 2 plates, a tilted platter, and a hallway that had swallowed sound. She thought of the earlier night when she had left the room and walked over packed snow and felt small and exposed. The moment required a new move. She walked to the hall closet, the place where Mark kept old mementos under a coat, and pulled out the small box he had shoved to the back. "What are you doing?" Mark from the doorway. His voice had a raw edge now, because the box was his. Claire felt the fourth emotional shift, from curiosity back to a quiet, wrenching sorrow. She sat on the hall bench and opened the box. There was a Polaroid of them at a county fair years before, Mark with a toothpick between his teeth, Claire with clay under her nails. There was a ticket stub from a movie they had fought over the decor of. There was a letter folded tight that Mark had kept, the one where he had written about changing shifts at the plant so she could teach evening pottery classes. The small items were concrete and specific. They were evidence of the quiet ways he had made sacrifices. Claire read the letter again aloud. "I can take the morning shift for 6 months. You keep your classes. I want you to do the thing you said you couldn't stop thinking about." Her voice broke when she read his handwriting, the looped letters she knew. "Mark, you did this," she said. "You rearranged your life for me." She looked up. He stared at the box as if seeing it for the first time. Mark's face softened in a way that had nothing to do with winning. "I did it because I thought it would make you happy," he said. "I thought it would be enough." The line was quiet. It had the shape of someone admitting failure in the only currency he knew, doing things. Claire's hands trembled. She had wanted proof of love to be loud and visible. Instead, she found it folded in a letter and pinned under old receipts. The discovery made her head move through a new frame. Ethan's kindness now sat against Mark's private sacrifices. The twist arrived in the middle of the chapter and shifted the map. The photograph on the kitchen table no longer felt like the only proof. This was the mini cliffhanger. Which proof would she accept? Outside, voices rose as the argument spilled from the doorway to the driveway. Mark stepped out into the snow to speak with Ethan. The space between the cars was tight. Breath steamed and made small clouds. They spoke using short sentences. It became a rapid back and forth. "You like her?" "Mark, I respect her," Ethan replied, done to use words like respect to hide what you really mean. Mark countered. "Mark, I'm not hiding anything, Ethan." "Then tell me what you want," Mark demanded. "I want her to be safe." "Ethan, safe how?" "Mark, safe from being lied to," Ethan answered. The exchange was compact and physical. Each line landed like a shove. Claire stood at the front step watching them, arms folded over her coat. She realized she had been the hinge of both men's argument, and that they were both speaking from their own histories. Mark argued from a ledger of actions. Ethan argued from observed moments. The fifth emotional shift crept through her, confusion toward a hard clarity that she could not be defined by the men arguing over her. Mark's voice turned pleading. "Claire, look at me. Who are you with me for?" He stepped back into the light and said her name slow and careful, like a question he hoped to answer. "Claire, tell me. I need to know." He it in a way that required a concrete action. She could hear her pulse. It beat under the fabric of her sweater. She thought of the small box, the ticket stub, the letter about changing shifts. She thought of the midnight texts and the photograph. She thought of the way she had avoided saying the thing that had grown inside her, a feeling of not being seen, not being listened to. She realized silence was its own action. She could not keep both their scripts in motion. Claire moved inside and packed a small bag. She placed a change of clothes in gently folded stacks, a toothbrush, the worn silver locket she always kept under her blouse. She ran her fingers over the wedding band on her hand as she packed. The motion was small but decisive. That packing changed the argument into something that needed an immediate answer. "Claire, what are you doing?" Mark called from behind the screen door. She folded the sweater and set it in the bag. "I can't keep living like I am balancing a debt I don't understand," she said, voice steady now. "I need to go where I can hear myself. I can't be between you and someone else while you two measure me like an object." The sentence was concrete, not abstract. It described action and consequence. Ethan stayed on the porch. "Claire," he began. "Don't Ethan," she said softly. "Not now." She did not look at him when she said it. She moved to the front step, put the small bag at her feet, and then, with a single motion, bent to pick it up. That act, lifting the bag, tightening the strap, stepping out into the cold, became the climax. It was the moment where the Chapter 1 designated climax happened. Claire choosing physical separation from the argument. Mark reached for her hand. "Claire, please." His voice had the sound of someone giving up the ledger to stand naked in a room. "You can leave like this. We can work through it. We promised." He did not finish the word. He reached and missed her wrist by a breath. He straightened and said, "I will change." "Tell me what to do." The exchange that followed was fast and almost desperate. "Mark, you said you would change when I asked you to talk more." "Claire, you changed your shifts, you changed schedules. But you never asked me how I felt. You never said you missed me." Saying it now won't fix everything. She named actions. She refused slogans. "Tell me you mean it with something you do, Mark," she said. Mark's mouth opened and closed. He stared at the small bag and at the footprint Claire left on the welcome mat. His hands trembled on the strap of his coat. "Claire," he said again, simpler now. Outside, Ethan stood with his satchel and watched. He did not reach for her. He did not make a plea. He one sentence. "I'll give you space, Claire." The words were short and careful, and Claire felt gratitude without relief. Snow began to fall heavier, a soft hush on the street lamps. Claire stepped down from the porch and set her feet in the packed snow. The cold pulled at the toes of her boots. She sat on the curb under the street lamp for a long minute, the men behind the door arguing in small bursts. She could hear muffled through the wood. She pressed her palms to her knees and felt the locket under her sweater. The streetlight flickered and settled. Her hands trembled as she opened the car door. The engine was cold when she turned the key, and the dashboard glow painted her face pale. She drove slowly down the street, tires whispering on the compact snow, the house receding in her rear view. She did not have a plan beyond the need to move. Movement itself felt like a clarifying force. She kept her bag at her feet. She kept the locket in her neck. Her chest felt raw, a series of tension points connected by breath. As she drove, she thought through the evidence she had found. Mark's letter about shifting shifts, the Polaroid from the fair, Ethan's factual account of the scarf, and the return book. The twist in the middle of the evening had changed everything. Now the larger question remained not who had done what, but which kinds of proof she would accept, and which would be proof of a life she wanted. She pressed the heater higher and wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. A car passed with headlights on. The snow blew into small curtains. Thoughts assembled into possibilities. She could return, ask for a calendar meeting, arrange check-ins, demand weekly conversations where Mark spoke emotionally by practice. She could go to the community workshop and let things settle. or she could keep driving until a different town blurred the edges of what she expected of herself. The choices were concrete, not metaphoric. Each required arranging a schedule, changing a habit, making a phone call. She drove past the corner where the bakery stayed open late, and where she and Mark had once stopped for coffee at midnight. The moment that could have been nostalgia now felt like a checkpoint. She turned the radio off and listened to the engine and the small sound of snow against the glass. At the next light, she pulled over and took the letter out of the box she had tucked into her bag earlier. She read Mark's handwriting again. The loops, the dates, the pragmatic sentences that had shifted his life in small increments for her sake. She folded the letter and slid it back into the box. That motion felt like a promise to consider, not a verdict. Behind her house, the porch light went dark. She did not look back, but she could feel the distance like a physical measurement under the tires. She eased the car into the main road and drove slower than necessary. Outside, the neighborhood glowed warm from windows. Inside, she felt cold and steady. Claire's decision to leave was not a final judgment. It was a deliberate, contained act. She had stepped away from a living room argument where two men tried to define her by their reactions. She had packed a small bag, accepted the proof of Mark's sacrifices, and heard Ethan's plain account. She had refused to let their voices decide the next movement for her without time to arrange her own. She turned onto a quieter street and watched the snow darken the hedges outside small houses. She pulled into a lot near the town center and shut the engine off. She sat with her hands on the wheel and let the silence fill the car. The road had given her a space to breathe and to make the only real choice available in that moment. To pause and sort the evidence, to return with a plan or to leave. She placed the small box of mementos on the passenger seat beside her and closed her eyes for a slow count of 10. When she opened them, she picked up the key and started the engine. She did not decide yet where she would go, but she decided she would not return to that house that night to be the hinge of two men's questions. She pulled back onto the road and drove away down the snow, slick street, the taillights shrinking into the distance, while the porch light behind her remained dark. The chapter ends with the concrete action she could not postpone. Claire turns the key, starts the engine, and drives away into the slick night while the house behind her fractures. Claire shoved the front door open and saw Mark's duffel sitting upright on the porch. Its strap looped over the banister as if someone had set it there to be taken away. He stood on the steps with his coat collar pulled up and his hands in the pockets, his expression closed in a way she had not seen before. Betrayal tightened in her chest the instant she noticed the duffel. She smelled the mildew of a week old suitcase and the sharp, cold metal of the porch light. "Mark, what is this?" Claire threw the keys into the bowl and pushed through snow with a mittened hand. "Claire," Mark's voice was flat as pavement, "I can't do the pretending anymore." The words landed and made the porch feel smaller. In the second sentence, Claire gave him room to explain. By the third, she realized this was not an argument she could talk him out of. Suspicion had been simmering for weeks. The photograph Mark had slammed onto the kitchen counter in the last argument, his clipped correction at the holiday party, and the duffel turned suspicion into a physical thing she could hold between them. She stepped forward and put a hand on the bag. Her fingers brushed the coarse canvas strap and came away with a speck of road salt. "You can't walk out like this, Mark." "Not tonight." Claire folded her arms, the motion more to steady herself than to shield. Her voice tightened. The year of small silences and polite dinners pressed against her ribs. Mark looked past her at the street. "I already filed the papers, Claire. I left copies in the duffel. I can pretend when I am not sure anymore." The last three words like someone who had rehearsed them until they fit the mouth without breaking. Claire backed off the step and felt something in her chest change, anger flaring into a question that would not be answered until she opened the duffel. She heard a car door slam 2 houses down. Ethan appeared a moment later, walking up the street in a dark coat, snow scattering off his shoulders. He stopped at the base of the steps and held out both hands in a quiet gesture of truce. "Claire, Mark, wait. Let me help." His blue, grey eyes tracked between them, careful and alive. Claire had seen Ethan the night of the neighborhood get together. His presence now cut into the argument and made everything louder. "Ethan," Mark sharply, "this is not your place to step in." Mark's jaw was a square line. Ethan set his satchel down and did not move his hands. "I live across the lane." "I heard a door." "Claire, are you all right?" He waited for the permission to speak and spoke again when she did not give it. "You don't have to decide now." His voice was low and steady. Claire felt the conversation press against her like wind. Doubt shifted under her skin to hurt. She pulled her mitten off and dug through the duffel until she found an envelope with a courthouse stamp and a folded one-way ticket inside. The paper felt heavier than it should. "What is that?" she asked, holding the envelope out with 2 fingers. Mark's face gave a small, almost imperceptible twitch. "I told you I couldn't keep going like this. I have a hearing in 2 weeks. The admission left his shoulders rigid. He did not explain the ticket. Ethan leaned forward, read the docket number over her shoulder, then looked at Mark. "You filed without talking to her." His tone sharpened by a degree. "I filed because talking didn't change anything. We have been circling the same conversation for months." "Mark." He moved his feet as if poised to leave or to stand his ground. Claire left the porch before either man could stop her and walked 3 doors down to Maya's. She did not lock the house. The kitchen light at Maya's was warm when she barged in and dropped the duffel on the linoleum table, unzipping it with fingers that trembled in a way she would not allow to sound in her voice. Maya reached across the table without asking and took the envelope. "You opened it?" she asked, frowning. Claire spread out the contents. There was a stamped envelope marked with a courthouse return address, a one-way ticket to Seattle folded twice, and a small printed sheet with a docket number and legal wording. The ticket had a date 3 days away. Maya put a hand on Claire's forearm. "Mark would just leave unless he meant it. That looks planned." Her voice was closed now, practical, no platitudes. The detail of a plain ticket changed what had been a raw argument into a plan that had been set in motion. Claire felt anger and then nausea. He could have asked. "He could have told me." Her words stopped against the sink, then fell. "Claire, you're not alone now, Maya." And there was a firm softness in the sentence that did not try to fix anything but offered a place to sit. Claire slid onto a chair and rubbed her fingers at her thumb where a worn patch of the wedding band showed. Outside the window, a car passed and made a soft hiss on the wet pavement. The house smelled faintly of coffee and lemon dish soap. Small domestic facts sat around her like witnesses. Ethan showed up at Maya's with his hands full of takeout and a nervous energy he could not hide. "I brought dinner," he said, setting the boxes down on the table as if offering peace. He put a paper bag beside the duffel and then sat without being asked. "Ethan." Claire, naming him because the sound of his name made him real in a way the duffel did not. "How did you know I'd be here?" "I saw you leave and followed. I figured Maya would take you in. I didn't want you alone." He tucked a stray hair behind his ear in the way she had noticed before, and that had made her lower her guard at the neighborly gathering. "I also found something in my mailbox earlier. A letter from a company in Denver offering me a role. I haven't told you because I didn't want to complicate things, but it's immediate." Claire blinked. The new fact landed like someone turning the page in the middle of a paragraph. Confusion bumped against the dull H of betrayal and threw up a small, sharp panic. "You have an offer." "Maya, when?" 2 weeks. Ethan's voice was steady, but his thumb tapped the table. "They were moving fast. I wanted to tell you in person." Claire felt the room narrow to the table's edge and the printed itinerary. "Ethan, what are you?" she started. "Claire, I need to be honest, Ethan. I told myself I would only help, but I can't keep pretending the way I feel is nothing. I like you. I care for you. I would leave if you wanted me to, but I want to ask you to make a choice tonight." He spoke with the directness that had always been his way. He avoided grand speeches and stuck to facts. Maya squeezed Claire's hand. "Mark just put a date on it. Ethan just put a deadline on himself. You have two people offering different kinds of escapes." The practical observation landed with its own force. Claire's stomach folded into the shape of decision. The emotions shifted again, from suspicion to the sting of abandonment, then to a brittle anger that wanted to prove something by movement. She stood up and walked to the window, watching the street. The house across the lane had a light still on. Mark's car was not in the driveway. She tested a sentence out loud as if it might fit. Mark filed the papers and planned to go. "Ethan has a job in Denver." Maya quietly, "You have choices, Claire. You also have time if you want it." "Time." Claire turned. The word was small but full of heat. "Do you know what he did at the party? He corrected me in front of everyone. He pushed a photograph across the table like it was evidence. He mean not to handle things my way." Her voice quickened. "He's been taking away the moments where I could show him what I feel. He chose the fight the night before he chose to leave." Mark called on his phone and his voice broke when he said her name. "Claire, please. Let me explain. Please let me come back and talk. Not here, not in front of Ethan." His plea had the worn edge of a man who had spent long nights drafting his sentences. "No." Claire answered with a steadiness that surprised her. "You to leave. You filed the papers. I will not be the person who begs you to stay to make you comfortable." She sat back down as if the movement were a small victory. Mark's reply was a low set of words edged with regret. "I am scared, Claire. I am afraid I've been cruel by staying. I wanted to protect what we had. I don't know how to be what you need." He was not theatrical. He was tired and precise. "So you file and walk away, Claire." The question was quiet but edged. Mark swallowed. "I thought it was the only honest way to stop pretending." Then he added, softer, "I don't want to lose you if there is a way to fix this. I do not want to lose what we built." Ethan set his bowl down and for a moment looked between them like someone assessing a map. "Mark, did you tell her any of this before you filed?" he asked. "No." Mark's jaw tightened. "I thought talking would be the same loop. I thought the papers would force a clearer conversation." His hands flexed at his sides. Claire's hands folded and she felt the wedding band cold and familiar against her finger. Anger moved into a quieter place of clarity. This was a problem of timing and method. Mark had turned an argument into action without asking her to share in the step. She pulled out the courthouse envelope again. "If you've filed, then there is a court date. I need to know what you want, Mark. Do you want separation or do you want work on us?" His name to keep the sentence grounded. Mark stepped closer and for the first time that night let his shoulders fall in a way that looked like vulnerability rather than stubbornness. "I want to try. I am afraid." I didn't know how to ask. His voice came down to something that might be tended. Ethan watched them and pressed his lips together. "Claire," he said, and this time his voice carried the weight of something that might be lost soon. "I have a job offer 2 weeks from now. I like you. I won't make you choose. I will not be the cause of a rushed decision. But I won't pretend either." Claire felt the pressure of alternatives forming like a triangle and realized she had been used to a steady line and now had 2 points pulling her in different directions. Her chest narrowed. She pressed her fingertips into the table until she felt the wood grain. Outside, a snowplow scraped past and made a low rhythmic sound. It felt like a metronome. That night Claire went to Ethan's kitchen because the house felt too close and the word, move, sat on her tongue in a way that needed air. Ethan made tea and left the kettle to hiss while he propped a chair up for her. They stood by his stove. He lit the gas and the flame was bright and blue, small and steady. "Why did you follow us, Ethan?" Claire, while he stirred the tea. "Because I couldn't let you walk into something that had already been planned," he said. He looked at her without searching for answers. "Because I owe you honesty. I'm not a savior. I have a chance to leave, but I wanted to tell you I like you before it happened." Claire listened to the rattle of the spoon. Her doubt cooled into a new shape, confusion, then a gentle pity she did not expect toward both men. Her hands found the cup and warmed against it. Ethan set the mug down between them. "If I leave, I will not be waiting with promises. If I stay, I'll be present. If you need time, take it. I'll be honest." He spoke in short sentences that matched the way he moved. Straightforward, unobtrusive. Claire reached up and tucked the hair behind her ear, the small, habitual motion she had with Mark when she wanted to steady a conversation. Her throat tightened. "Ethan, you can be the reason I closed the door on a marriage just because you are here now. I need to know I chose something on my own." Her voice was firm. "I don't want to be your reason." Ethan agreed. "I want you to be the one who decides." He did not lean in. He did not demand. At 2 in the morning, Claire went back to her house with the envelope clutched in her hand. The streetlights had a yellow haze against the melting snow. She unlocked the door and found Mark on the living room couch with a blanket over his knees, and a look on his face that was raw enough to be soft. "Claire," he said, "I couldn't sleep. I am sorry for not telling you." He kept the sentence brief and true. She sat opposite him and pushed the envelope across the coffee table. "You filed this. You planned to leave. Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice did not tremble. She wanted the facts. Mark took a breath. "I thought if I gave us a definitive step it would stop the ambiguity. I thought I owed it to both of us to stop hurting you with my confusion. I was wrong about how to do that." He stopped and looked directly at her. They argued in shorter bursts now, 3 rapid exchanges in which each tried to explain motive and hurt. "You gave up on us without talking, Claire." "I didn't think talking would get us anywhere," Mark replied. "You filed legal papers like you made a plan without me, Claire." "Because I feared the slow erosion more than a clear break," Mark answered. "You didn't trust me enough to try harder, Claire," and the sentence landed. Mark's face shifted in a way that made her look harder. "That's not, I trusted us. I thought I was saving us from more damage." He pinched the bridge of his nose. The room held for a long breath they both took. Claire opened the envelope again and pulled out a thicker packet than the initial courthouse notice. It was labeled and stamped and bore Mark's signature on the filing line. Someone at the clerk's office had already processed it. Her hands shook when she touched it. "You filed it," she said. The words were a factual observation. Mark nodded. "I did. I thought I could show you how serious I was by taking action. I thought if I walked away, maybe the idea of losing me would make us face the truth. I don't know if that was right." He looked smaller than he had since they met. A sudden, sharp twist of feeling cut through Claire, an unexpected clarity. Mark's fear had driven the filing. It was not a betrayal to humiliate, but an attempt to fix his own broken way of loving. She felt pity and then, quickly, a guarded compassion. "You panicked and chose a deadline, Claire." Her voice was cold but not cruel. "That doesn't give us a roadmap for repair. It gives us a court date." Mark closed his eyes and let out a breath that sounded like surrender. "Then tell me what to do. Tell me if you want me to fight." His hands rose in a small asking gesture. Claire thought of the photograph he had shoved across the table in Chapter 3 and of the party where Mark's correction had made her leave the room. She thought of every small kindness he had offered, making coffee on Sundays, the way he straightened a picture frame the exact millimeter she liked it. She also thought of nights when his answers were short and her questions were long, and he seemed to shrink from the depth of them. Her emotions shifted again, from pity to guarded hope, then to a firm resolve. She could see more clearly the person she had married and the person he had become under pressure. She could also see a life that had been comfortable enough to keep her from asking the harder questions. She pushed the wedding band across the table and watched Mark's fingers twitch as his name left her mouth. Mark, I am not leaving tonight. I am not staying because you asked me to stay out of fear. I will not sign away my time to answer you because you filed first. I will go to the hearing, I will listen. But I am not going to let a stamped envelope decide my answer. Her speech was practical and measured. Mark reached for the ring and then stopped, letting the space between them stay real. Claire, he said, I am willing to come to counseling. I will do the work. I filed because my head was taking over my heart. If you want time, I will give you space, but not walk away from the possibility of repair. He stated small commitments. Counseling, fewer closed-off responses, asking instead of assuming. Ethan walked in the door without a sound and stood in the threshold with his coat still on. He had been pacing the sidewalk for hours. What's happening? He asked. Mark filed. Ethan. He filed and planned to leave. Claire. She did not ask him to react. She put the facts into the room. Ethan's face registered a combination of irritation and sadness. He tried a short line. Then he made a choice without you, then a quieter one. Claire, whatever you do, I'm not going to force you to pick me. The three of them talked with short sentences that fit the tension. There was a rapid exchange where each stated a boundary and a possibility. 3 to 5 lines that moved like quick oars. I will wait for the hearing. Claire finally. But I will not be pushed into an answer tonight. She it with the absolute quality of a person who had tightened a rope and would now hold it steady. Mark nodded. I'll come to counseling. I'll take responsibility for the way I handled the filing. I was scared and I'm sorry. He the apology plainly. Ethan set his satchel down and exhaled. I'll take the Denver offer, probably. I can be the reason you rush. But I will be honest. If you ask me to stay, I will consider it. Only if it comes from your choice, not from the pressure of a court date. He kept it short. Claire watched them and felt the though beginning in a way that had nothing to do with reconciliation and everything to do with clearing the ice that made choices slip. She realized she could not fix the past, but she could decide what to bring forward. At dawn, she stood at the threshold with the small bag she had packed, the worn silver locket, a sweater, a change of clothes. The snow had softened to slush and the street lamps cast long, pale puddles. She put the locket into her palm and closed her fist around it. Mark stepped onto the porch and looked at her. Please come back inside, he said. Claire held his gaze for a long beat. She thought of years of steady friendship, the safe architecture of their marriage, and of the nights when she had felt unseen. She also thought of Ethan's quiet honesty and the way a new neighbor had listened. She reached into the bag, took her wedding band off, and walked to the threshold. She did not clench or throw it. She placed it on the small wooden table by the door and slid it across to Mark. I will not answer tonight, she said. I will go to the hearing. I will listen. But I need time away from this house to know what I want without being cornered by a paper deadline. The sentence was clear and concrete. Mark's hand hovered over the ring and then closed around it. He swallowed. I will come to the hearing. I will do counseling. I will be here not as a threat, not as a solution, but as someone who will do the work if you will let me. He kept his promise in small words. Ethan stepped forward and put his hand briefly on her shoulder. Take whatever time you need. I'll be around. If you want me to go to Denver, I will. If you want me to stay, I'll listen when you're ready. Whatever you choose, it will be yours. He it without drama. Claire shut the door with one measured motion and turned the deadbolt. She slung her grey knit beanie over her hair and felt its familiar weight. The front step felt solid beneath her boots. She walked down the path and paused at the end of the walk to turn and look at the house once. The porch light shone on the duffel half visible through the window. She felt both loss and a small, steady relief that she had made a decision about her own timetable. When she stepped off the porch and into the pale morning, the sound of her boots in the slush was precise and regular. She took one step down the street toward Maya's, then another, then tightened the strap on her small bag as the first pale light of the day lifted the edge of the snow. Inside the kitchen window, Mark held the ring in his palm like an object to be learned, not like a weapon. He set it on the mantel and then sat down, folding his hands. Claire crossed the lane and did not look back until she reached Maya's front door. She knocked once, and Maya answered with a mug in her hand and a look that said the place was already set for her. Claire stepped inside and closed the door on the immediate urgency of the night. She had returned the band, but she had not closed the book. The court date would come. Conversations would be scheduled. Counseling would be a slow and practical process. Ethan would make a decision about Denver. Mark would show up and try to show up differently. Claire had chosen to create breathing room rather than an immediate resolution. She opened her small bag at the kitchen table and set the worn silver locket on top of the sweater like a small talisman of what she intended to protect. Her clarity. Outside, the snow along the gutter turned to grey water, and the first drip fell from the eaves with a soft, specific plunk. Claire watched the window sill where a smear of melted snow left a narrow, wet line against the glass and felt the motion of thou as a set of small, factual changes, not a symbol, not a mood, but a list of things she could measure. A dropped bolt of filed paper, a practiced apology, a plain ticket that might be used. She sat and made a plan. Call a counselor the next day, show up at the hearing to listen, refuse to accept decisions that were made for her without her knowledge. She wrote the dates on a napkin and folded it into her wallet. When Maya, if she wanted coffee, Claire nodded and put the locket back inside her palm, feeling its familiar weight. At the kitchen window, the waterline widened and another drip hit the sill. Claire slid the wedding band into the pocket of her coat and left the house once more, not to return to the same life, but to start with a single concrete action. She would attend the hearing as herself and speak when asked. The step felt small and exact, and she walked toward it.